الأحداث في حصص تحليلية مميزة. إذاعة الجزائر الدولية، صوتنا في العالم.
With Radio Algeria International, you will not miss a single major political or economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The permanent representative of Algeria to the United Nations, Mr. Ammar Benjama, has reaffirmed at UNRWA Donors Conference Algeria's unwavering support for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees. In the Palestinian territories, over 70 people have been killed in airstrike carried out by the Israeli army against the southern and central parts of the Gaza Strip. And the Spanish Federation of Institutions in Solidarity of Western Sahara has called on the United Nations mission for the referendum in Western Sahara, MINURSO, to confront the plundering of natural resources by Morocco in the occupied territories. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. First, the Sheikh Ba Abdurrahman Al-Kurti Council, made up of dignitaries of around 10 representatives of the Mzab Valley, as well as Brian and Gurara in the southern province of Ghardaya, expressed its support for the candidacy of Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune in the next early presidential elections scheduled for next September 7. In a press release made public on Thursday, the Council called for support and mobilization for a strong participation in these elections, which strengthen the democratic process of our country. The Council believes that the support for a second term of Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune makes it possible to continue the process of reforms and complete the program and the achievements recorded on all levels and lead Algeria towards a promising future for which the Algerian people aspires. The Independent National Electoral Authority, ANI, has announced that the accreditation request for both Algerian and foreign professional journalists to practice in Algeria on behalf of a foreign media outlet as part of the coverage of the presidential election of next September 7 must be submitted to the diplomatic mission or the Algerian consular representation in the country where the head office of the media outlet is established, and this between July 15 and August 20th. A press release issued by ANI says that as part of the preparations for the early presidential elections of September 7, 2024, the Independent National Electoral Authority informs Algerian and foreign professional journalists to practice on or who will practice in Algeria on behalf of a foreign media outlet that the accreditation request must be accompanied by the following supporting documents, which are a request from the employing body of the professional journalist, an information form for temporary accreditation available on the ANI website, which is www.inaelections.dz, a visa application form available on the website of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad and Algerian diplomatic and consular representations abroad. The Ministry of Culture and Arts has decided, in line with Algeria's efforts to support the Palestinian cause, to postpone all major festivals scheduled for this summer. A ministry statement said that, in line with Algeria's unwavering support in favor of the Palestinian cause and the Palestinian people in their legitimate struggle against the barbaric Zionist aggression, and as part of the efforts made by the Algerian state, led by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, in support of the oppressed Palestinian people who are subjected to an abject massacres and a genocidal war committed by the criminal Zionist forces, the Ministry of Culture and Arts has decided to postpone all major festivals that were scheduled for this summer season. It was also decided to adapt the remaining cultural and intellectual activities to this position of solidarity with the Palestinian cause and to strengthen the cultural events aimed at enshrining local popular cultures and the constant of national identity. The permanent representative of Algeria to the United Nations, Mr. Ammar Benjama, has reaffirmed Algeria's unwavering support for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, calling on all partners to continue to provide support so that it can fulfill its mandate. Miriam Barshi has more details.
Speaking at an UNRWA donors conference, Mr. Benjama indicated that the meeting was being held at a crucial time as the Palestinian people faced the brutal onslaught of the Israeli occupying power, stressing that the meeting was a new opportunity to renew commitments to UNRWA and to Palestinian refugees. The representative of Algeria to the UN recalled that Algeria was part of the central group of the initiative launched by Jordan, Kuwait and Slovenia on shared commitments on UNRWA.
It comes at a crucial moment when the Palestinian people face the brutal onslaught of the Israeli occupying power. This meeting is a new opportunity to renew our commitment toward UNRWA and toward the Palestinian refugees. For this reason, Algeria was in the core group of the initiative launched by Jordan, Kuwait and Slovenia on the shared commitment of UNRWA.
Mr. Benjama stressed that amid the current humanitarian disaster and widespread famine in Gaza, the role of humanitarian actors is crucial, UNRWA underlining that UNRWA is irreplaceable. The Algerian ambassador deplored that the UN agency is under continuous attack from the occupying power with the clear objective of dismantling it and eliminate the refugee issue.
In this context of humanitarian catastrophe and widespread risk of famine in Gaza, the role of humanitarian actors is crucial. As the backbone of humanitarian actions in Gaza, UNRWA is irreplaceable. Unfortunately, instead of being empowered, it is under relentless attack from the Israeli occupying power. The objective is clear: dismantling UNRWA to eliminate the refugee issue.
Mr. Benjama recalled on the occasion that Algeria, by decision of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, recently allocated $15 million to UNRWA in response to the UN Secretary General's call to allow UNRWA to continue functioning and help the UN agency to overcome shortages following the decision of certain donors to freeze their contributions.
My country, Algeria, upon the decision of President Abdelmajid Tebboune, has very recently allocated $15 million to UNRWA in response to the SG calls to allow UNRWA to continue operating. This aim to help the agency overcome shortages following some donors' decision to freeze or to suspend their contributions.
Finally, Mr. Benjama reaffirmed Algeria's unwavering support for UNRWA and called on all partners to continue to support it so that it can fulfill its mandate now and in the future.
Over 70 people were killed in new airstrikes carried out today by the Israeli army against the southern and central parts of the Gaza Strip. Palestinian sources said 289 other people were wounded in the bombardments that hit the Al Mawazi camp in the Gaza city. The civil defense spokesman affirmed that the rescue operations were hampered by the intense bombardments and stressed that the victims of today's attack were transferred to several hospitals in the region. Similar attacks were targeted the refugee camp of Deir el-Balah and Nusayrat in the central part of Gaza. This came as the World Health Organization warned that malnutrition continued to increase the vulnerability of the inhabitants to infectious diseases. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres once again called on donor countries to pursue their financing of UNRWA, which is more than ever vital for the Palestinians. Addressing the conference, he recalled that the UN was facing funding gap, while recalling that the Palestinians were witnessing widening gaps across the border. He recalled that this year the situation was different on account of the collapse in order and law and the continued bloodshed the Palestinians are confronted to. Let's listen to the Secretary General.
UNRWA staff members have been killed, the highest staff death toll in UN history. And UNRWA is also being targeted in other ways. Staff have been subject to increasingly violent protests and virulent misinformation and disinformation campaigns. Some have been detained by Israeli security forces and subsequently reported mistreatment and even torture. Hopelessness is the greatest ally of instability, and the work of UNRWA is one of the greatest factors providing hope and stability across a troubled region. Without the necessary support and financing to UNRWA, Palestine refugees will lose a critical lifeline and the last ray of hope for a better future. And my appeal to everyone is this: protect UNRWA, protect UNRWA's staff, and protect UNRWA's mandate, including through funding. And let me be clear, there is no alternative to UNRWA.
And the UN chief also recalled that the death toll recorded by UNRWA was higher, pointing out that the UN agency has been particularly targeted by a violent protest and disinformation campaign.
Yes, we face a profound funding gap, but Palestinians are seeing widening gaps across the board. Gaps in respect for international humanitarian law, gaps in recognition of universal human rights and dignity for all. And for Palestinians in Gaza, not just a gap, but death, destruction, and a total breakdown in law and order. Just when we thought it couldn't get any worse in Gaza, somehow, appallingly, civilians are being pushed into ever deeper circles of hell. Recent days have brought yet more evacuation orders by Israeli authorities, yet more civilian suffering, and yet more bloodshed. Palestinians in Gaza keep being forced to move like human pinballs across a landscape of destruction and death. And all those desperately trying to get aid to them. Nowhere is safe. Everywhere is a potential killing zone.
The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres appealed for more support to be provided to help protect UNRWA and its staff. The International Court of Justice, ICJ, will render its verdict on the legal consequences of the occupation of the Palestinian territories by the Zionist entity on July 19. The International Court of Justice has announced that on 19 July it will deliver its opinion on the legal consequences arising from the policies and practices of the Zionist entity in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Al-Quds. A public hearing will be held at 3 p.m. at the Peace Palace in The Hague, the seat of the court, during which the president of the court will read out the advisory opinion. The Spanish Federation of Institutions, in solidarity with the Western Sahara, has called on the United Nations mission for the referendum in Western Sahara, MINURSO, to confront the plundering of natural resources by Morocco in the occupied territories. Speaking before the Committee of International Cooperation for Development at the House of Representatives in the Canary Islands, the president of the Spanish Federation, Mr. Carmelo Ramirez Marrero, declared despite being at the service of respect for human rights, the MINURSO had to face up to the plundering of natural resources and the repression by Morocco which are worsening the situation. And the Spanish Congress of Deputies has become the most relevant stage to denounce the legal stance of Pedro Sanchez's government towards the Sahrawi people after several votes that isolated the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party and expressed the rejection of the support to the Moroccan occupation regime. The Congress welcomed the Sahrawi ambassadors of the Holidays in Peace program. The deputy Sidi highlighted that the program Holidays in Peace has established itself as one of the main actions to raise awareness of the cause of the Sahrawi people and a bridge linking the Spanish people with the Sahrawi people. For his part, the representative of the Polisario Front, Abdullah Arabi, stressed that the presence of these Sahrawi miners represents the unanimity of support for the Sahrawi people and solid solidarity, which provides sufficient elements for Spain to recognize the Sahrawi state as it did with Palestine.
We have attended the reception of Sahrawi miners in the Congress of Deputies, a reception that demonstrates once again the existing unanimity regarding the Sahrawi cause in Spain, mainly at the Spanish Parliament. This solidarity that demonstrates once more that there are sufficient elements for the Spanish state to take the decision to recognize the Sahrawi state like it did with Palestine. Here we will continue working so that these little Sahrawis can prepare themselves for the future that all the Sahrawi people aspire to, that is, to live free and independent in their country, namely the Sahrawi Republic.
Mr. Arabi also sent a message to the different political forces, reaffirming that the Sahrawi people will remain firm in their struggle and legitimate demands. And South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Mr. Ronald Lamola, has reiterated his country's commitment to supporting the Sahrawi people's struggle for self-determination and independence. During a parliament session, Mr. Lamola said that since his country's foreign policy was steeped in South Africa's history of solidarity with those fighting against oppression and occupation, South Africa would continue to support the Sahrawi people in their struggle for self-determination. With this, we come to the end of this news bulletin. Time now for our weekly program with our colleague Aziza Gassias. For me, I'll meet you again tomorrow for a fresh edition of our news bulletin. Until then, stay tuned to Radio Algeria International, and bye-bye for now.
Hello and good to have you with us in our program devoted to Algerian figures and personalities who marked history, notably in arts. Today we shed light on talented Algerian artist Mohamed Rassim, the founder of the school of miniature painting that still exists in Algeria today. Visitors to Algiers art museums, such as the magnificent National Gallery of Fine Arts in Algiers, are likely to come across the works of Mohamed Rassim. In Algeria and perhaps in most parts of the world, we cannot think of the past century's art of miniature without mentioning him, the father of Algerian miniature painter and calligrapher. In addition to being an accomplished artist, Mohamed Rassim was known for using his art